Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm really excited to bring you today's video. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Let's get started. San Nicolas Island, located 60 kilometers off the coast of California, was a peaceful and isolated island inhabited by a thriving indigenous tribe until the early 19th century. The island was one of the most significant living areas for the Chumash and other native peoples, and its residents had established a sustainable way of life. They knew the local fauna and flora well and lived in harmony with these resources. Juana. Maria was a Chumash woman born and raised on this island. She grew up deeply connected to nature, acquiring skills in hunting, fishing, and foraging from a young age. Family bonds, community solidarity, and tribal traditions formed the foundation of her life. She lived a peaceful and orderly life with her family on San Nicolas Island. However, 1835 marked a turning point in this peaceful existence. That year, significant changes occurred on the island, and its residents faced a difficult decision. At the time, the island, like other native lands in California, was under increasing pressure from American and European colonial forces, leading to conflicts over land, living spaces, and ways of life. San Nicolas Island became part of these tensions. The conflicts between tribes ultimately led to the mass departure of the island's indigenous people. Other tribes and Juana Maria's family decided to leave the island in search of survival in new lands. This separation marked the beginning of a difficult period for Juana Maria. As others left, she chose to stay behind. While the exact reasons are unclear, some speculate that she felt a deep connection to the island's nature and spirit, believing she could not adapt to another way of life. Many sources indicate that after the departure of the rest of the tribe, she intentionally chose to remain alone, retreating into her inner world and preferring a solitary life. However, this decision also reflected a profound loyalty to her island, her roots, and a love for her land. The last members of her tribe who had journeyed to San Nicolas Island departed with sadness and disappointment. There were only a few people left, and they were expected to leave soon as well, as Juana Maria's solitude was limited to a handful of people, and even they were struggling to survive while battling the island's harsh nature. Alone on the island, Juana Maria began a relentless struggle for survival. The island, while offering a nurturing and peaceful environment, also presented a wild and challenging landscape. Juana Maria fought against nature's difficulties, growing stronger each day. She began living an isolated life, disconnected from other humans and the outside world. Over time, her solitude transformed into a survival force and a way of life, with which she deeply identified. Yet every day she walked a fine line between life and death. Juana Maria's life on San Nicolas Island was an exploration of survival and her connection to nature. Over the years, she continually honed her survival skills and uncovered the secrets of living in harmony with the environment. However, this life also involved struggles with loneliness and the psychological challenges posed by the island's isolation. The difficulty of existing in her inner world became a profound experience for Juana Maria. From 1835 onwards, San Nicolas Island became Juana Maria's world. Her isolated life was soon to undergo a significant transformation, but until then, she would continue to survive in the solitude of the island, determined and resolute. After her family and the rest of the tribe left San Nicolas Island in 1835, Juana Maria remained alone. She had learned to coexist with her loved ones, her traditional way of life, and her community, but now she had to build a new way of life without these elements, in the wild isolation of the island. Initially, loneliness was foreign to her, painful even, but over time it became a form of normalcy, eventually even becoming a habit. Her longing for human companionship slowly shifted into a deeper connection with nature. However, it is clear that the desire to communicate with others never fully disappeared. The length of the days, the cold of the nights, and the challenges of nature showed her that nature was both incredibly harsh and filled with beauty. With each passing day, she had to fight against loneliness and darkness. At first, her longing for the warmth of home and community weighed heavily on her. But over time she began to find a different meaning in the silence and peace that came with being alone. As her mind tried to establish a balance and harmony with nature, memories of the past slowly faded, and she began to focus solely on survival. To survive, Juana Maria developed basic survival skills such as hunting, fishing, and foraging by establishing a deep relationship with nature. The island had a rich flora and fauna, but there was no teacher or guide to show her how to use these resources. She relied on her observations, trials, and errors to gather the food the island offered, learning proper hunting techniques along the way. Seafood in particular became her primary food source. San Nicolas Island offered a lifestyle closely connected to the sea. Juana Maria developed techniques to catch fish, trap seabirds, and gather other resources brought by the ocean. This process took time, but eventually she was able to fully take advantage of the richness of marine life around the island. As a fisherwoman, she would row out into the sea and practice underwater hunting to meet her food needs. Alongside hunting, plants played an essential role in her survival. Juana Maria began learning about various plants on the island. Medicinal herbs, edible roots, and fruits became her primary food sources. Some of these plants helped with survival, while others were used as natural medicines. Carefully examining the botanical wealth provided by nature, she learned which plants were toxic and which were nourishing. She began digging the soil to collect local roots and fruits. The island had become a life source that always provided her with food. Not only food, but shelter was also a significant concern. Juana Maria used the island's natural resources to build herself a shelter to protect herself from the wind, cold nights, and rain. She crafted shelters near waterfalls, using stones and local plants, providing herself with a safe and protected space. By skillfully using the surrounding nature, she was successful in securing a place for survival. However, the survival battle nature provided was not just physical, it was a mentally challenging experience. Juana Maria had no one with whom to communicate. Emotional bonds, casual conversations, and shared feelings were replaced by solitude. In her mind, there was only herself, nature, the struggle for survival, and the sorrowful echoes of memories. In the early days, loneliness felt like an emptiness gnawing at her soul. Being deprived of emotional connections gradually turned into a psychological burden. In her mind, the loss of her family and tribe left an ever-deepening void. She remembered their relationships, but she could no longer reach them. There was no one to hear her voice. At night, while watching the stars alone, she sometimes felt like a lost person. The only friends around her were the sounds of nature, the rustling of the wind, the waves crashing on the shore, and the songs of the birds. Coping with loneliness sometimes made her feel as if she had stepped outside of time. By recalling memories of her past life, she tried to ease her worries about the lost traces of her tribe. After some time, however, loneliness also gave her an inner strength. The process of being alone mentally made her more resilient. Against the emotional turbulence in her mind, she developed a sense of inner calm. No matter the situation she faced, she realized that she could do whatever was necessary to survive. The skills needed for survival eventually provided her with both mental and physical freedom. Juana Maria's loneliness was not only a physical experience, but also an emotional journey. At the end of each day, as she entered a night isolated from other humans on the island, the memories of her tribe's departure and the longing for her loved ones filled her mind. Continuing to live alone on the island was not only a fight for survival, but also a process of rebuilding her identity, questioning her past and future. The deep bond she had with nature gave her the opportunity to rediscover herself. Loneliness became an experience that not only kept her alive, but also allowed her to discover her own strength, determination, and self-worth. This solitude was a challenging but equally educational journey of becoming one with nature, struggling with existence, and delving into the depths of a human soul. During her time living alone, Juana Maria was constantly faced with the struggle for survival. The challenges awaiting her on the island were not only the harshness of nature, but also the severing of her connections with humanity. At first, loneliness led to feelings of anxiety and fear, but over time, This situation turned into an opportunity for her to develop survival skills, live in harmony with nature, and discover her inner strength. Day by day, by exploring the rich flora and fauna of the island more deeply, the strategies she developed to obtain food and water not only kept her alive but also made her feel like a part of nature itself. Juana Maria's life on the island was largely shaped by the sea. San Nicolas Island had a rich marine ecosystem along its coastline. There were enough fish to meet her daily food needs, but catching them was not easy. Alone, she had to learn hunting techniques to ensure she had enough food. However, Juana Maria quickly found a way to solve this problem. Fishing at first was quite difficult. Using primitive nets made of stones and hunting tools on the island's shores, fishing seemed to be an uncertain and complex process for Juana Maria at first. But over time, she began to notice areas near the shore where fish were abundant and developed her own fishing techniques. Fish traps made from stones, seashells, and local materials became an effective method to gather food. Additionally, she gradually improved her swimming skills to make better use of the sea. She could dive into the ocean's depths, moving more accurately and effectively between the waves to catch fish. This skill she developed for survival gave her the opportunity to form a strong bond with the sea. Fish were more than just a source of protein. They represented life itself. Water procurement was another vital part of survival for Juana Maria. The island had limited freshwater sources. Therefore, obtaining drinkable water from seawater was a challenging process. Juana Maria discovered several small freshwater springs on the island, but these were limited and often dried up. Instead, she created natural storage areas to collect rainwater. Using moss and seashells, she devised a system to gather rainwater. Water, being one of the most vital necessities for life, became one of the things she spent the most time and effort on. There were only a few animals on the island, which forced Juana Maria to rely on hunting to survive. The limited diversity of fauna made hunting wild animals quite challenging. Only a few small rodents and birds were available for hunting. However, each hunting session was a significant effort and risk. She managed to survive using the hunting method she developed through experience, but sometimes it took a long time to find prey. Juana Maria hunted rodents and birds by setting traps and tracking their footprints. In addition, simple arrows and spears made from stones were effective tools for hunting small animals. To capture birds, she created inventive traps using the island's nets and natural materials. The process of hunting for food not only taught her survival skills but also helped her understand the deeper workings of the natural world. The lifestyle of each animal shaped her hunting strategies. In addition to hunting, Juana Maria also began using plants as a food source. The island had a rich diversity of plants, which played an important role in meeting both her food and medicinal needs. The natural plants were not only used for nourishment, but also for their healing properties to address health issues. Among the plants she discovered on the island were those with edible roots, leaves, and fruits. Especially the fruits obtained from trees and local plants were crucial in providing vitamins and minerals. Furthermore, some plants had medicinal properties, and Juana Maria used them to address health problems. For example, various leaves and roots were used for wound treatment and to prevent infections. At first, identifying plants correctly was quite difficult. However, over time, her observational skills in nature taught her which plants were safe and which were toxic. This accumulation of knowledge helped her not only in finding food, but also in maintaining her physical health. Gradually, by getting to know nature better, she began to prepare for every kind of danger that might arise. Along with all these efforts, another challenging aspect of Juana Maria's survival struggle was the psychological pressure she faced. The conditions of daily life reminded her of loneliness, hopelessness, and sometimes depression. However, with a mindset of trying to find a solution in every difficulty, she managed to resist the challenges posed by nature. Living in harmony with nature brought her inner peace. Hunting, fishing, and feeding on plants were processes through which she naturally learned all the necessary survival skills. All of these activities also taught her over time to accept the rhythm of loneliness and what nature had to offer. As she lived in harmony with the sea, the land, the wind, and the stars, she became a mentally and physically strong woman. Her struggle for survival not only taught her to stay alive, but also to embrace the richness nature provided and become one with it. The year 1853 marked a turning point in Juana Maria's life. At just 18 years old, she had survived on San Nicolas Island for 18 years, living an isolated life deeply connected to nature. However, in 1853, a group of hunters arrived on the island, breaking its silence. This group had come to hunt whales, but finding Juana Maria was the most surprising discovery they made. This moment, which would later be recorded as the first contact in United Nations historical records, would fundamentally change Juana Maria's life. For the first time in 18 years, Juana Maria encountered a group of people outside the island. Initially, the hunters did not fully understand who she was or what people she belonged to. They only saw a woman who had survived alone for a long time, living like a foreigner in the wild nature of the island. However, they decided to help her. At first, Juana Maria's situation seemed both fascinating and frightening to them. The idea that a woman could survive alone on a remote island for so long amazed and earned their respect. The woman could neither speak about her past nor communicate in an understandable language. It was clear that the years of isolation on the abandoned island had left deep marks on her. However, on the other hand, this encounter represented a new hope and discovery for them. The hunters decided to take Juana Maria with them to California. This decision offered her a return, a new life, and perhaps a chance to reconnect with humanity. For them, this discovery represented the unveiling of an unknown part of human history. However, for Juana Maria, this new journey, while a kind of awakening and a new beginning, would undoubtedly be a difficult process of readapting to the modern world. After leaving San Nicolas Island, Juana Maria made her way toward the shores of California. After spending so many years in solitude, a bustling, noisy, and modern world awaited her. Stepping from the silence of the island, from the peace that nature had provided, into the chaos and crowds of a city, presented her with a difficult transition. When Juana Maria arrived in California, the world that awaited her was very different. First and foremost, there were language and cultural barriers. She had not communicated with other people for a very long time. It had been years since she had been away from her people, her language, and her traditions. Therefore, the language barrier was one of the greatest challenges she faced. While the hunters wanted to help her, the difficulties in communication initially posed a significant obstacle. She had forgotten her own language, and the silent and solitary world she had lived in had taught her a different mental language. Now she was trying to decode the meanings of a completely different world. Juana Maria's first encounter with civilization brought her a profound cultural shock. Life on the island had been simple and naturally organized. Her days had been spent solely on survival and living in harmony with nature's cycles. The only things she had done on the island were survival efforts and daily chores. But now, before her stood the rapidly progressing and complex structure of the modern world. The people in the city, the different lifestyles, and cultural norms left Juana Maria bewildered. She had been far removed from the concepts of civilization. Clothes, shopping, conversations, meals, and the noise of the city. All of these were foreign to her. The way people interacted, spoke, and conducted business seemed complicated and completely different from what she had known. This immense cultural shock pushed her into an inner crisis. The deep connection she had with nature was so different that it could not be replaced by the relationship she formed with people. In addition, adapting to a settled life was a physical and emotional challenge for her. Moving from the outdoors, where she had lived alone for so long, into an enclosed space and living with people created a huge emotional collapse for her. Mentally, she was caught between contradictions, torn between the external world and her inner world. Transitioning from the solitude of the past to the chaotic human society she now faced was a difficult process. As she began her new life in California, Juana Maria started to feel increasingly alienated with each passing day. People tried to help her, But Juana Maria's heart remained on the island where she had fought for survival. For so many years, she had lived a solitary but free life. Now, as much as the modern world around her was foreign to her, the people in that world felt just as foreign. The complexity and noise of civilization did not bring her peace. Rather, it gave her a sense of loneliness and alienation. As she stepped into a new world, the traces of her past echoed in her mind, the tranquility of the island and the immortal memories of her years of solitude. However, the modern world was a place where everything felt complicated, hard to understand, and equally frightening. While she dreamed of returning to the calm of the island, she was lost in the chaotic nature of city life and human relationships. And ultimately, this cultural and emotional contradiction became a significant barrier to Juana Maria's adaptation to civilization. Though Juana Maria's heart longed to return to the island where she had lived alone for 50 years, she had already taken a step into modern life, and that return was irreversible. The new opportunities that civilization brought seemed, in a way, like destruction and loss. Her past, the land she had lived on, and the way of life had built her identity. Now it was too late for her to find that identity again. Adapting to the complexities of civilization showed her how contradictory and fleeting life could be. In the end, Juana Maria's inability to adjust to the modern world somehow wore down her spirit. The noise and chaos of civilization were far removed from her peaceful and natural world. The new hope she had found in 1853 soon disappeared, and the desire to return to that distant island, where everything had once been old and meaningful, grew stronger. In the early days after Juana Maria was brought to California, she was filled with excitement and hope. After years of loneliness and the harsh life on the island, she finally had the chance to live with people. It seemed like a new beginning, a new hope. However, as time passed, those hopes were replaced with deep loneliness and a sense of incompatibility. She had lost her deep connection with nature and felt lost in the chaos of the modern world. Adjusting to her new environment was not as easy as she had expected. After Juana Maria was brought to California, people around her initially tried to help her. In fact, the story of a lost and found woman had caught the public's attention. Juana Maria was warmly received by several people. They treated her kindly with the pride of having rescued her from the lonely island. However, shortly after, it became impossible to understand her inner peace and what she truly felt. The gap between Juana Maria's old life and her new life was so deep that the public's attention and love could not offer her any comfort. While she was somewhat pleased to be with the people around her, the emptiness inside her grew with each passing day. She felt like a foreigner who didn't belong in the crowded and complex world of California. All the knowledge she had was only about surviving with nature and being self-sufficient. In this new world, social norms, human relationships, and daily lifestyles were entirely different, and Juana Maria felt lost within these differences. Over time, Juana Maria's sense of loneliness deepened. The people around her in California did not lose their interest in her, but the differences became more and more apparent. She was a foreigner in the modern world. Adapting to social life felt frightening and complex to her. Communicating with people was completely different from her traditional way of life. During her years with her tribe, social interactions were simple yet meaningful. But here, in the midst of crowds, it was impossible to form a truly deep connection with anyone. In her inner world, the strong connections she had formed while alone on the island gradually weakened in modern society. While she was integrated with nature on the island, everything was interconnected and all decisions somehow affected each other. Her relationships with people were simple but internally fulfilling. However, in California, everything was very different. People were strangers to each other, and the traditional nature-based lifestyle she had known was seen as incomprehensible and intriguing. Many people viewed Juana Maria's life on the island as some sort of exotic adventure, but this perspective only further isolated her. She found herself trying to accept the attention of people on one hand, while feeling distant from them and unable to connect on the other. The gap between the simple yet meaningful life on the island and the world in modern society, where everything developed quickly and superficially in a race driven by ambition, was vast. As Juana Maria drifted further from her traditional Chumash culture, she began to experience an identity crisis. On the island, she lived among her people, speaking her language and following her culture. At that time, she was part of a community where everyone knew one another and helped each other. But in the modern world, she faced a culture that was unfamiliar and difficult to comprehend. These cultural differences deeply shook her. There was a sense of uncertainty about how she would define herself. In the past, she knew who she was. She identified herself as a member of the Chumash tribe. She spoke her language, lived by her traditions, and with her community. But now, that entire identity had been replaced with a sense of ambiguity. She felt like a foreigner, trying to step into civilization while forgetting her traditional people and language. The social behaviors of the people around her were part of a complex structure that she couldn't make sense of. Everything based on her observations was done at an unnecessary speed and superficially. People couldn't understand each other in their relationships. Rather than forming a real connection, everything seemed to be viewed as a problem that needed a quick solution. This created a deep emptiness in Juana Maria's soul. On the island, everything was cyclical. Everything had a meaning. Here, everything felt like a race. In California, interactions between people were very different. Families, traditions, and social rules were unfamiliar to Juana Maria. People lived in a kind of forced interdependence to conform to social norms. Juana Maria struggled to understand and apply these social rules. Family structures, ways of doing business, methods of showing respect, eating habits. All these social elements were completely foreign to her. In California's modern world, relationships between people developed quickly, but remained superficial. As people engaged in social interactions, the depth of their relationships did not increase. Instead, they simply became more routine over time. This was very strange for Juana Maria. On the island, social interactions were more honest and meaningful. People knew each other and shared valuable moments. But here, relationships were far more superficial, and people were growing further apart from each other. Over time, Juana Maria's sense of incompatibility deepened. The emptiness in her relationships with others reminded her of the years of solitude she had spent on the island. Despite the allure of the modern society with all its lights and noise, she couldn't find peace within herself. Her search for someone with whom she could truly connect and who would understand her only further isolated her. No matter how warmly she was received, she still felt like a stranger and an outsider in this new world. This cultural mismatch led to an identity crisis within her. Although she had survived in the modern world, her heart remained attached to her old natural life. Over time, even within the crowds, she continued to sink deeper into loneliness. After Juana Maria was brought to California, a new life and hope awaited her. However, the short time she spent in the complex and rapidly changing world of civilization only deepened her internal conflicts and feelings of loneliness. After years of isolation on the island and a life intertwined with nature, the struggle to adapt to the challenges of the modern world became both physically and mentally draining. Her life, briefly reshaped by the people she lived with for only a few weeks, ultimately grew too heavy with these contradictions, and this burden would eventually end her life. As Juana Maria tried to adapt to modern life in California, the deep impact of the years she spent on the island became more evident with each passing day. Those years of isolation had not only taught her survival skills, but also left emotional and psychological scars. Mentally, the pain of those lonely years and the struggle for survival had created deep marks that shaped her soul. While people in the modern world tried to help her, their efforts to ease her loneliness were insufficient. She was a woman trying to survive, but the emotional burden of her solitary years on the island was slowly consuming both her body and soul. During the long years she spent on the island, Juana Maria had focused almost entirely on survival. Hunting, fishing, and foraging for food were the simple yet effective methods that kept her alive. However, the physical and psychological cost of this fight for survival was great. The 18 years of solitude and struggle for existence had made her resilient, but as she began reconnecting with humanity, the loneliness she had accumulated over the years started to engulf her. The simple life on the island had provided her with spiritual peace, but the complex relationships among people created a deep sense of alienation and an internal void. In the early days of her new life in California, Juana Maria had longed to be among people and to be a part of society. However, the crowds in the city, the chaos of daily life, and the complexity of human relationships began to feel like an insurmountable wall. Now, the social rules and the challenges brought by civilization slowly isolated her. As she tried to integrate into society, her feelings of loneliness grew. The fast pace of the modern world could not offer her the peace and serenity she had once felt on the island. The fight for survival she experienced on the island showcased just how strong a human spirit could be. But now, just a few weeks later in the modern world, a woman who had tried to blend into the crowds was beginning to feel the overwhelming weight of loneliness. The deep psychological effects of those lonely years, no matter how physically strong she had become, made her emotionally vulnerable. Civilization's offerings began to feel like a burden. Her connection with nature on the island was far stronger than any bond she could form with people. Juana Maria only survived a few weeks in the modern world. That brief time was not enough to erase the effects of the long years she spent on the Hawaii island. Mentally and emotionally, she endured great devastation. The noise and chaos of modern life had taken her away from inner peace, leaving a void in her soul. The idea of returning to the island, escaping the chaos of civilization, became a growing hope within her. But tragically, that hope vanished before it could come to fruition. In 1853, after just a few weeks in California, Juana Maria passed away. Her life had been limited to a short period, but this brief chapter became a symbol of the strength of the human spirit. The years she spent on the island had taught her the necessary survival skills, but the struggle to survive in the modern world proved much more difficult and destructive for her. Juana Maria's fight for survival, both with nature and her inner world, carried a profound psychological burden, one that eventually led to her demise. Juana Maria's story gradually evolved from a survival tale into an example of the resilience and evolutionary strength of the human spirit. In 1960, a novel titled Island of the Blue Dolphins was published, turning her story into a fictional narrative. The book told the story of loneliness, the struggle for survival, and a woman's life intertwined with nature. Juana Maria's real-life story inspired many, and her years on the island, her efforts to survive alone, and her attempt to reconnect with civilization have been recorded as one of history's most poignant survival stories. Juana Maria's life will be remembered as a story of how a human can survive under harsh conditions, how strong they can be, and how vital the deep connection to nature is. Although she lived a short and painful life, her struggle for survival has been immortalized as one of humanity's most powerful and touching narratives.